A major social media platform has agreed to a $400 million children's privacy settlement, just as trade tensions rise in North America and the war in Ukraine delivers another brutal civilian toll. Welcome to the Automated Daily, Top News Edition, the podcast created by generative AI. It's August 22nd, 2026, and I'm Trend Teller. Here's what you need to know today. This episode is brought to you by CrispCall. CrispCall provides agentic cloud telephony for modern businesses. Find the link in the episode notes. We begin with the latest from the war in Ukraine. In a new development, Russian ballistic missile attacks hit the Kyiv area, and Ukrainian officials also reported one of the deadliest strikes of the day in Kryvyi Rih, where at least 15 people were killed and around 30 were injured, including children. On the Russian side, reports said a Ukrainian drone strike hit a house in the south of the country, killing 2 children and injuring their parents. The immediate picture is grim on both sides. This war is still reaching far beyond the battlefield, and civilians remain deeply exposed. Staying with international tensions, the story we've been following around Iran also shifted again. President Trump publicly downplayed the Iran war, even as his administration prepared to tighten economic pressure on Tehran. That combination matters because words and policy do not always move in the same direction. Softer messaging can suggest restraint, but new sanctions can still raise the temperature and affect how the conflict develops across the region. In North America, a trade deadline came and went without a final U.S. Canada agreement, and new U.S. tariffs have now taken effect on some Canadian goods. This is the newest escalation in a relationship that is economically close but politically under strain. For businesses, it means more uncertainty. For consumers, it can eventually mean higher prices. And in a sign that Washington is also watching inflation closely, President Trump is temporarily allowing up to 300,000 metric tons of ground beef into the U.S. without higher tariffs. So on one hand, tariffs are going up in one part of trade policy, while on the other, the White House is trying to ease pressure in the food market. There were also 2 serious public safety incidents today. In Edmonton, Canadian police said a man is in custody after stabbing 2 people during prayer at a Sikh temple. Authorities have not yet fully detailed motive, but any attack at a place of worship quickly raises concerns about targeted violence and community safety. In central Sweden, public broadcaster SVT reported that an armed attacker entered a school, leaving 1 person dead and 2 others seriously injured. School attacks and assaults on religious spaces are different kinds of cases, but both tend to trigger the same wider questions. How secure are public institutions, and what more can authorities do to prevent violence in places that are supposed to feel safe? In Colombia, officials said the death toll from the recent earthquake has risen to 31. That updated number points to a disaster on a very large scale, with rescue, identification, and recovery efforts still ongoing. When a death toll keeps climbing days after a quake, it usually means the emergency response is moving from immediate rescue into a longer and harder phase: shelter, medical care, infrastructure repair, and the slow work of accounting for the missing. In technology news, TikTok has agreed to pay $400 million to settle a U.S. lawsuit tied to children's privacy. This is one of those cases that goes beyond one company's legal bill. It adds to the pressure on major platforms to prove they are handling minors' data responsibly, and it gives regulators another big example to point to when arguing for tougher digital safeguards. The broader message is pretty clear. Child safety online is no longer a side issue for tech companies. It is becoming a core legal and business risk. And in U.S. legal and political news, the Supreme Court temporarily allowed the Trump administration to keep building a White House ballroom while a lower court order is on hold. This is not a final ruling on whether the project is lawful, but it does mean construction can continue for now. That makes the decision important in a practical sense, even if it is only interim. High-profile presidential projects often carry symbolic weight, and this one is now moving ahead while the courts continue to sort out the larger legal fight. Thanks to our sponsor, Lindy. Lindy is your ultimate AI assistant that proactively manages your inbox, meetings, and calendar, so you can focus on what actually matters. Find the link in the episode notes. That's your top news briefing for August 22nd, 2026. From Ukraine and Iran to trade, technology, and public safety, the theme today is pressure building on several fronts at once. Thanks for listening to the Automated Daily, Top News Edition. I'm Trend Teller, and I'll be back with the next update.